evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and it had been well over 1,000 days since we last had over 100 points scored against our miserly defence. Yet that wall came crashing down this week as the Demons suffered their fifth loss in 8 weeks. With only 2 wins against top 8 teams this season and 4 games remaining against another set of top 8 teams, our top 4 aspirations are looking very dire. Joining me tonight to dissect the loss against the Bulldogs is longtime Demonlander George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, Demonlanders. Good evening, Bin Man. Well, there are lots of questions from the Demonlanders on the website this week, so we hope we can provide you with some answers, but is it really Bin Man's curse that's still the problem? Let's find out.
Well, also joining us tonight, perhaps to give me some hope that our season is not teetering on the edge of oblivion, is Bin Man. Good evening, Bin Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Apologies, a bit croaky today. I've not been well, but I got myself out of my sick bed for the podcast, and I'm going to play it with a very straight bat today, and no jokes about curses or any such stuff. I'm super, super excited about this match coming up. And if you'd believe, as you know, I'm a punter, if you'd believe everything you read in Demonland and just that was your guide to whether you were going to bet in this game, you would expect, wouldn't you? Who do you think's favourite for this game? At home against...
I know because I saw on my footy tipping competition who's leading, and I almost fell out of my chair when I saw it. People have no idea.
No, don't they? So Melbourne are favourite at their home ground for this game. That tells you all you need to know about what the pros think where we're heading. We're 375 for the flag. At this very point in time last season, we're 550 for the flag. I know that because I backed us after we lost this game. So, look, I'm really keen for this weekend. I'm really keen for this next month of footy. I'm more confident this year of winning the flag than I was last year. And why I say I play with a straight back, because to be perfectly frank, I'm over being knocked for being optimistic on that front. I predicted it. It happened. And somehow or other, if you read Demonland, I'm some crazy wacko bloody conspiracy theorist. So now I'm looking at patterns and lining them up with what happened last year. It's remarkably similar, and we'll talk about some of the similarities in this very game. We're tracking exactly the same way. Why would my confidence be any different to last year?
The other possibility to Bin Man is that punters are very bad at picking winners. That's why punting companies make it like.
But they don't.
But that's why we're favourite.
Bookmakers make money because they take the margin. Punters, when you're getting the sort of money that's in the pool, millions and millions of dollars have been bet across multiple betting platforms, and we're 375 for the flag. Punters are a different breed. They're putting their money where their mouth is. It's not $20 here and $20 there. It's pros putting $20,000 on or $50,000 on. They don't do that for shits and giggles. They do that because they want to make a profit. So I'm waiting till it gets out to 4, and I hope it will before Friday, because after Friday's game, it won't get anywhere close to 4 again. So if it gets to 4s, I'm on it.
So this program's brought to you by Sportsbet.
Gamble responsibly.
If you're choosing not to gamble responsible, this is the week to do it, because I think this is a fantastic bet. I can't believe actually we've got tightened up. I thought we'd drift a little bit, but yeah, we're slight favourites in this match coming up, and I'm super confident we'll roll them.
Well, let's before we get on to next week's match, let's talk about this week's match. And well, I called it, and if you recall last week, I made the obvious prediction that we would hear very little about Jake Lever's shoulder injury during the week, and that he'd be selected to play on the Thursday night, and that just before the game he'd be a late out. Well, prediction confirmed. I didn't get any money for that, Bin Man, but I also went further to speculate that his injury would force him out for longer than just the one match. So watch this space. I don't reckon he's going to be back this week, but that could just be some MFCSS creeping in. It's certainly not ideal going into a match and losing your key forward. That's Ben Brown, and one of your key defenders, the aforementioned Jake Lever. And we most definitely have not had much luck this season with our key position players. We've had Ben Brown, T-Mac out. We've had all three of the tall defenders, Petty, Lever and May, all at various different primes, sometimes within matches. And it's been a bit of a revolving doors for all of our talls, because then you include like Max Gawn and Luke Jackson, and I don't think either of them are fully fit at the moment, and we'll talk more about them later. And the match was a traditional shootout that the Demons fans have not been accustomed to, particularly in the past few years. As mentioned at the top of the show, we have to go back to, funnily enough, round 19, 2019. Also a match at Marvel Stadium, that time against the Saints when we last conceded 100 points. We conceded 100 points or more 5 times in that 2019 season. And George, in your match report, you aptly described that alarm bells should have been ringing, as a shootout is not how we generally play and beat teams. If we're going to concede a big score, then our makeshift forward line was going to have to match it. And surprisingly, we were able to pile on a big score ourselves. And if not for some inaccuracy in the last quarter, we might have won the match. I concede that I didn't think we'd be able to score 100 points given our depleted forward stocks. That is missing our 2 premiership key forwards. And when we failed to once again select 2 key forwards, and then with Ben Brown was a confirmed out and Sam Wiedemann was set to replace him, I wasn't confident that we'd able to kick a winning score. I didn't think we'd actually be able to kick 50 points, let alone 100. And credit to Sam, he did provide a target in the forward 50 and was able to kick 3 goals himself. However, his work up the ground proved to be lacking, and he just doesn't provide that same marking target on the wing for our kickouts that both T-Mac and Ben Brown provide. However, despite our ability to actually score, there are still some major problems with our forwards, and that comes in the form of a lack of defensive efforts. Sam Wiedemann and Jake Milksham laid 0 tackles. We praised Jake last week for his 7 tackles. Fritsch 1, Spargo 2, Pickett 3. I wasn't aware of this until I read your match report, George, but not one single tackle for the whole game was laid in our forward half of the ground. The Bulldogs were able to easily amble, saunter, mosey, meander, or simply waltz out of our defensive zone. And what has happened to our defensive forwards, whose pressure was fundamental to our premiership tilt last year? Our defensive systems and structures were dealt a last-minute blow with Jake Lever withdrawing from the game, and their task wasn't made any easier with the lack of pressure and support up the field. Our rucks weren't doing their part defensively, as Tim English was able to waltz into the forward line unattended and hit the scoreboard on a few occasions. Our kicking strategy changed this week from the long kick up the field to the short chip, but we often end up putting players under more pressure when none existed just to clear the area. And oftentimes we just bombed a kick out that either went straight to a Bulldogs player or went deliberately out of bounds. And despite losing the clearance, our midfield didn't lower their colours too much with their counterparts, but it simply wasn't enough when they don't have the support of others around the ground. Our rucks both looked out of sorts. Max doesn't look right. He's most definitely carrying an injury and he looks to be running in mud around the ground. Doesn't help that he's being battered pillar to post each week with no help from the umpires. And now onto the Yellow Maggots. After being ahead 6-4 at quarter time, the Demons did not receive a free kick in the second quarter and only received 1 free kick from quarter time to just before 3/4 time. The Bulldogs had 18 frees to 7 after quarter time, and a dog supporter behind me was livid with a free kick that we got before 3/4 time, saying that was the reason they won the flag last year. The Bulldogs seem to be blessed in the umpiring department. Time and time again, we were pinged for holding the ball when no prior opportunity existed, yet they were able to hold the ball for any length of time, be spun around 360, 540, 720 degrees, and then drop it like a hot potato, only for it to be called play on. And I won't go so far as to blame the adjudication for the losses. We have a lot more problems than that. And guys, and particularly you, big man, I'm not sure where we go from here. Our next 4 games are against genuine top 4 teams, and honestly, in my eyes, if things don't change, I think we'll lose all 4 of those. So I'll take whatever bet you're betting, go bet against you, and we'll be bundled straight out of finals. And this I don't think it's any form of MFC SS. This for me is reality. And big man, I swear, if you bring up any parallels with this time last year, which I'm sure you're going to soon, I'm going to reach through the computer screen and bop you on the head with my keyboard. But don't let that dissuade you. I want to hear what you have to say. We need to shake things up, and doing the same things over and over again is not working. I get the theory that repetition in our system, so that come finals times it's second nature, but for me the plan A is not working. I think teams have worked us out. Add to that, our personnel is not performing to the same level as last year, whether it's form or injury or both. We can't keep selecting the same players and expecting different results. We can't keep playing the same way and expecting different results. And Big Man, I love your positivity, but I think you truly believe that it will all just magically click come round 20 and beyond, and that will just mirror that amazing run that we had last season. As they say, past performance is not a guarantee of future results. And from where I'm standing, we're a shadow of the team. And if things don't change in the coming weeks, then pre-season is going to start a lot earlier for us next year.
Now,
Your
Andy, this is not directed just at you.
Yes,
but
no.
You are in this camp.
I'm definitely in the camp.
Sometimes I wonder whether I'm watching the same game that other people are watching. So your point about we're so predictable.
Yep.
Right. And we play the same way, which is the point I've made, is how important repetition is. This
we changed
game,
it up. We did change it up.
Exactly like last year in this same game, is we did a whole range of things that Goody never does. So, as we've talked about, we chipped to the pocket often, and we gave that short kick up. We looked to switch it much more often. And the key difference is that we never went into tempo mode. We never once went into control mode, except outside maybe a couple of minutes here or a minute there, is that it was a huge, huge difference to the way we play our footy. And that has to be an instruction. So I can only imagine that he engineered a shootout. The question for me is there's no way that maximised the likelihood we were going to win that game. So for me, that question is why would he do that? Why would Goody do that? Because there's no question in my mind fatigue has played a role. We're looking fresher and fresher. We're on the way up. All of the things that people talk about, we won't have to go it again, but Max running in boots, yeah, maybe he's carrying an injury, but maybe he's also fatigued from a period of loading, whatever the point is. But we did some remarkably different things in this game. And I hope you noticed too how many of the really long, aggressive handballs that we did into space. It seems like they are... He's decided now in the beginning part of the season, the focus was on defence and let's get that mechanism completely right. And it seems like in this match and a little bit last week, but more so this week, he's just gone, let's play a shootout game. Let's go. Let's get our scoring going. Let's get that rolling in preparation for what we need to do. Because... if let's say I'm right and fatigue is an issue, well, the best way to manage a game that you're in when you're fatigued is to slow it right down, and we barely did that at all, which, as Goody said, it's not the Melbourne way. Now, he's in control of that. It's not as if the team that is so well drilled suddenly forgets our game plan overnight. So it's hard to believe that wasn't a conscious decision by the team and the coaching unit to say, look, you know what, we're going to go for a shootout. Let's get our scoring happening. We know that we can defend. And so people are screaming for Goody to change things. People are criticising him for being one-dimensional and, repetition, all the comments that you just made. And in a match we do, they score 110 points and we score 100, a great game of footy for the neutrals, but that's not a Melbourne game and it's a complete outlier. Now, you could suggest that's some mental weakness or some other weakness, but that doesn't, to me, it doesn't stack up logically. He's so methodical. The way everything is planned is so methodical. And so just like last year, for instance, a real interest for me was that they didn't put any time tactically back. They had Melksham on Keith. And I thought for sure that they were going to man up on who's the defender, the left footer?
Gardner?
No, they're left footer. The coming off the halfback flank.
They had Hannon down there as well. No,
his name escapes me. It's their best footballer, basically, or best defender with Daniel not in the side. I was sure that he was going to go to him. His name escapes me at the moment, and he didn't. And he killed us. He killed us off the halfback flank, and Goody didn't do anything with it. He just let that player run, exactly like we did last year in the corresponding game where they scored 85 points on a wet and slippery night. So we didn't defend last year well at all in that match. We let them get out completely. It reminded me a lot, actually, of the Adelaide game last year, and that the first time we played them, the way they were able to score so easily, and we never slowed the tempo down. It just seems to me that it was a really fascinating game from that perspective. To me, that throws up a whole raft of other questions. Is like, that was, an important win. And, I firmly believe they didn't maximise the chance of winning because their eyes on a bit different prize. They're not worrying about this game. They're worrying about the flag. Now, we could have a whole debate about whether that's prudent or that's good man management or that's, or even that's the case. But that's my view of it. I mean, it's 110 to 100. And we were played well. We played pretty good footy. 2 weeks ago, everyone was talking about how poor, including you, Andy, how poor our offense was. Now, suddenly, David King reckons our big problem is our defense. I mean, surely any Demon fan's really not really worried about our defense. No. So our offense isn't a problem all of a sudden, and we still haven't brought in our second tall, which we will this week. I'm absolutely positive of it. And we know our defense works. So if our offense is suddenly working, we know our defense will commence working again. So our system's there. So I don't share your negativity at all on that front. In fact, as I said, I'm genuinely more confident of us winning the flag this year than I was last year.
George?
I've got a slightly different view. So, and everybody can pick their perspective from what we've got to say. I think it finished up in a shootout because the Bulldogs have to. When you look at their points for and points against, their points against is 1502. The next team on the ladder with those number of points is Hawthorn, who are in 13th position. Their points for is 1680, which is third on the ladder behind Geelong and Brisbane. To put it simply, the Bulldogs have a very, very leaky defence, and they depend on kicking more goals than the opposition, which is the aim of every side, but in order to cover up the leaky defence. It also gives undue credit to our forwards because everybody kicks lots of goals against the Bulldog defence. So I don't think our forward line was working all that well. It was just there was very little competition or very little defensive efforts coming from the Bulldogs. They threw everything at us, and we had some appalling umpire decisions go against us, some really crap turnovers, particularly towards the end at the wrong time. We could have easily won this game. It was really disappointing that
we absolutely could have won it.
Yeah, we could have won it. We're still not playing well. There's still a lot of passengers in the side at the moment. The two rucks obviously are either carrying injuries or are severely compromised in some way, shape, or form. The fact that Tim English can start taking contested marks against people like Gawn is a fairly good indication that all is not right there.
Or Norton can shove him aside like he's a midfielder.
That was another example. And those sort of little things in a game that's only won by 10 points become critical in the end. So I thought it was really disappointing. And what other people have asked questions about this on Demonland, about the efforts from the forwards. So they just didn't do enough to stop that Bulldog transition, which we know that's the way they play. They flick it around, they throw it around to create the opportunities. You've got to start slowing them down and stopping them, or else you finish up in a really serious situation. So we avoided that.
I guess that's my point, though, George. I mean, that's if you're on board with the notion that they're going through a heavy period of loading, and I think that Demons there's a chance we load even more heavily than any other team because that was Burgess's philosophy. He goes hard. Is that the sort of ability to stop an opposition spread and to spread the ball is our ability to do that's our one wood. But that's compromised is a great word to use before. Our ability to do that is completely compromised. And in this same game last year, we could not stop their spread. They just moved the ball up the field super easily. Once we played them in the grand final, we stopped them, that same team. They could not move the ball out of their back half. And Goody made the point again, and also Gorney in the game afterwards, is that they won the territory. That's what they're pointing towards. That's because you're right. We didn't put the pressure on them. We didn't drag. But that's I think, a function of where they're at. I don't think it's a function of a complacency or a mental weakness or some of the other theories that have been put forward. And if I'm wrong, then there's genuine trouble in paradise. Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think the other difference is, like you've just pointed to, there are certain players in the side at the moment who weren't in that grand final side, and the numbers this week are showing up the same deficiencies as to why those players weren't in that grand final last year. You just need to put effort in right from the very start, and defence doesn't start at the full back line. Defence starts in the forward line. When you see players letting their opponents waltz down to the middle of the ground before a Demon player even gets to within close contact of it, you know what, it's just playing totally into the Dogs' hands in that case. So I don't expect to see those players playing in a couple of weeks' time.
Well, and an interesting one who didn't play in the grand final, I thought, was Weed. And again, if you listen to Goody's presser, there's not much subtext there. He kicked 3 goals, Weed. So if you're a fan who's fixated on numbers, 3 goals for a key forward, he's done his job. Not if you listen to Goody. No. If you listen to that presser again, he makes it clear that he played okay in the first half and didn't do what he needed to do in the second half. And in the absence of a second key tall, his basic absence in that second half was really the death knell for us, I thought, because we just couldn't bring the ball to ground. He wasn't competing up. He had a great first half, all credit to him. Was helped by the speed at which we were moving the ball because it generated more one-on-ones for him to get out into space. But when he didn't have any impact in the second half, in the absence of having another genuine tall, and as you say, you make the good point about the 2 ruckmen not being up and about, that we really struggled then. I thought that was a huge factor in the game, his drop-off in the second half.
I was on the wing where he, a number of times up the ground on the wing, was just either outmarked or misread the ball and it went over his head and he was out bustled. And, he just doesn't provide that same marking on the wing and the half forward that we get from the others. So, and Goody was basically, the question was framed, he did really well, we did really well tonight, and his answer back was it was the biggest backhanded compliment I've ever heard, basically. Well, he barely acknowledged that he played well, to be honest, and then he commented about him not being there in the second half. So, all right, well,
George, what do you think about that notion of them not controlling the tempo at all? Because if you are wanting to slow them down, the best way to do that is to hold the ball for periods of time. It was we didn't seem to do that at all. Normally we get a lead and we hold, or they start to get momentum and we suck the life out of the game and they can't take advantage of it. Neither of those things happened.
Yeah, but it was also we allowed them to run the game the way they want to play it.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. It was on their terms.
Yeah, with a lack of defence, they get to move the ball as freely as they like. We've got to get the ball back in the first place to be able to control the tempo, and that just didn't happen because...
Yeah, but when we did, we didn't look to chip it around, which we normally do. So we look to suck the life out of a game in normal. The Melbourne way is to, even when the other team's on top, is to hold the ball, chip it around, go slow, take the full 30 seconds, and we just didn't do it. We'll go the whole match.
Yeah, but some credit must go to the defenders as well. They had, 20% more inside 50s, and our guys, particularly, and Goody made a point of it in his presser, in that third quarter, it was inside their forward half for 15 minutes straight. It just didn't come out that any other side would have cracked under that sort of pressure. They did a magnificent job. So there was, like I said, a few unfortunate errors in the air that in the end that everybody concentrates on. But the fact that the ball was still going straight back in, says the problem's not in the defensive side, it's further up the ground.
And as you point out, we didn't have Lever there. No. Tomlinson, I think, played well the previous week, but he's a bit limited in terms of his one-on-one ability.
Yeah.
And look, all credit must go to the Bulldogs. They were fantastic. Bontempelli was simply phenomenal in that last quarter. Ugelhagen was terrific, carved us up. But that other tactic that they did of low driving kicks looked great. But that tactic, again, when you're putting the pressure on that you're saying is absent, when you bring that, those kicks are very hard to execute. Yeah. And also those lead-up, Ugelhagen won't get those lead-up hits when you put the right pressure on. So the question really is, can we get that pressure back? And I expect that we will. But, if we don't, we're toast.
We've had a lot of listeners supplying questions in the podcast thread on demonland.com. So tonight we're not going to do our usual tactics talk segment or listing our positives and improvements, as a lot of the questions touch upon thoughts and ideas that we were going to talk about anyway. And in addition, we really like the interactivity with our audience. So, we also have a question from a listener that left a message on our answering machine. So I might go to that one first. Here he goes.
G'day guys, Johnny. Love the podcast. Found you guys through the Demonland Facebook page a while back. Long time listener, first time caller. Listen to the show every week as I walk my dog. The little bugger has never exercised so much in his life as he has the past 2 years, but enough about me. I want to get your thoughts on our kick-out strategies. Last year and all of this year, I guess, we've been kicking out long, well out of the 50-metre arc to the half-back line. This week, we look like we changed things up a little bit and went a lot shorter, chipping it around. I thought this strategy was a bit of a failure because it seemed to me that we were putting ourselves under a lot of undue, unnecessary pressure. I just wanted to get you guys' thoughts on that one. Love the pod. Keep it up.
Georgie, we're going to talk about our kick-out strategy, so it's probably a good chance for you to jump in and give your thoughts on that.
Yeah, we'll try and run the podcast a little bit longer so your dog gets some longer walks in the coming weeks. But,
if we get to a grand final, it could he'll be able to walk to Geelong.
Yeah. So, look, this was really interesting because, when we talk about tactics every week, we did talk about this last week, the value of repetition and surety and certainty, and it's all about percentages. So the long kickouts have served us very well, and then it was a real surprise to me that this week we started doing short chip stuff into the forward into the pockets, and then going a second longer kick. I can't say that it worked very well, and it could be a sort of something for people to reflect on, in the sense that when the ball's 70 metres away, it takes them 2 kicks to get back. When a short kicks fail, it's already back in the 50, and the opposition have got another chance to score, which I think a lot happened this week. Credit to the Dogs. When I saw it in action, they positioned a couple of players sort of right on the 50-metre mark. So they allowed that first kick, but those couple of players were forward of the next kick. So the next kick went up towards Gawn and one of the Jackson English combination sort of on the wing, and invariably the ball fell forward into the hands of the 2 Dogs players sitting on that 50-metre line, and back it came in again. I don't think it worked because we're not used to it. We haven't done it before that I've seen this season, that sort of tactic. So the repetition argument still stands very strongly in my eyes, at least. Maybe it was something we're trying something different, just to in the lead up to the finals, as Bin Man might suggest, we're trying and exploring other options. But yeah, I can't say that I thought that it worked this week. I would have much preferred the ball was 70 metres up the ground and not coming back in any great hurry.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it's an interesting question, because to me it fits with the pattern that I felt like watching the game, that Goody was experimenting. And the other thing, that Hibbo took out quite a few kicks. I reckon when May plays, he probably takes north of 85% of all kickouts. I should say not free kicks, kickouts. And Hibbo I reckon he probably took a good third of them in this match. And they definitely were looking for those short ones, and also much more crossing, much more lateral movement in the back half. The other thing just on that front of being aggressive was, trying new things, was our centre square setup. We were being super aggressive in that. We were rolling the dice a lot more than we have all season in terms of that setup. Just on that point you made last week about about why they kick out to that left-hand side, the benefit of doing it, one at 70 metres away from your goal, I hope it doesn't bounce back. The probabilities are on your side in terms of you get scored on very few times, you get the option of it going out, all of those things. In the dying minutes, about 90 seconds to go of the Richmond Freo game on the Friday night, Freo went from the kick out, they crossed back into the centre with one of their kicks, and then came back and turned it over. They turned it over because they went out to a one-on-one. That's the other thing. If you go if you think of a fat side, you go to the empty side and you've got 80% of your players all stacked up on that narrow side and squashing up. that means you're going to be kicking to a one-on-one on that's on the other side. And if you lose it, you're in trouble. And that's exactly what happened to Freo. They would not have lost that game of football if they had gone down the line like Melbourne do. And they do quite often too. And they kick to Darcy. In that circumstance, 90 seconds to go, he has a brain fade and he goes the other direction, the other side. They lose that one-on-one and they end up drawing a game that they should have won, really. Freo they dominated that last quarter. And that's, in a nutshell, why, you don't do it, is because why it's dangerous even in this game, trying different things, because under the heat of pressure, 90 seconds to go, you can't be giving up a goal. He had a complete brain fade to doing it. The percentage play every day of the week was kicking down the line, and it cost them the game, and that's a big loss, but more cost them a draw, I should say.
Let's move on to the next question. Is from D Zephyr, who's asked, could you discuss Spargo if you get the time? Reading the changes thread, I've seen a few mentions that he should be omitted this week for a couple of reasons, one being low possessions and also not hitting the scoreboard. And this D Zephyr goes on to say, I don't think he should be omitted. From where I sat on Saturday night, I witnessed him working tirelessly up and down the flanks to become an option. He was ignored a few times, and a couple of those times were inside 50. Plus, his kicking is elite going inside 50. Some players have stated half forward is an extremely hard position to play. B-Man, your thoughts on Spargo?
It's hard. Like I said before, is Goody doesn't put much stock in stats and numbers. So it's really hard looking from the outside into some of those positions, particularly those small forwards, because it's all about role execution. And in the absence of not knowing exactly what that role is, it's hard to know whether he's performed to the level. Though what you can suggest, if they keep getting picked, they've executed their role sufficiently for Goody to pick them again, because you go out of the team if you don't do your role. It's a bit of a conversation that you come back to multiple times this season with Spargo, isn't it? Because same with Cozzy. People were saying the same thing about Cozzy 5 weeks ago. Low possessions, like you were saying, Andy. I get that he does pressure and that's his role, but we're good to see him kick goals. It's a bit about whether he's executing the role. It's hard to tell, because unless you're focused on him. But if D Zephyr's sense is he worked tirelessly up and down the ground, then I'm probably guessing that's what Goody's expectation of him is, and so that he's executed the role that he's been asked to. But to George's point, he didn't lay a tackle. Obviously, if we didn't have a tackle in our forward half, then he's probably one of them.
I believe the tackle was just in forward half. I think he did have 3 tackles or so for the game. 2.
I think the other thing that people look at what they see on the television too often. When you go to the ground, and people may have noticed over the last couple of weeks, Spargo's not playing all that much in the forward line. He's the first rotation on the wing.
Yep.
So when Jimmy Jordan comes off, Spargo goes to the wing. So it's not surprising that Spargo's not kicking too many goals. He's running up and down the wing for a good majority of the game. He spent a lot of time this week in exactly that role, probably more so than what he would normally do, simply because Jordan was off the ground in the first quarter with a knee injury.
For a fact, that looked terrible too. It didn't look like he was. I thought his season was done.
Yeah, so Spargo only played 63%. He's not a classic wingman. He's not a Langdon who's going to run up and down all day, every day. So he needed a lot of rest on the wing. What you do get with Charlie Spargo is an almost elite level of delivery whenever he's got the ball in his hands. He will always hit a target. Quite often he seems to be in no man's land with nowhere to go, and all of a sudden he's found that guy 20 metres away where others probably wouldn't have been able to achieve it. He's still doing his job very well. It's not surprising he's not getting a tackle inside 50. It's because he's not inside the 50. So you can't find a problem. You've got to look at where the problems are, not where the problems aren't.
and you can't underestimate, a bit of my hobby horse about kicking skills. And you can see you could make a case for we lost that game on the back of Steve May's horrible turnover. Spargo hits targets, and the chains don't break down, and he's a mainstay, really, isn't he? So,
yep.
Next, we've got Big Mac Jr. and I think we're the second part of his post. We've basically talked about in terms of the style and stuff, but he has brought up a couple of stats that we might want to talk about. And Big Man, I'd love to hear what you have to say. He said, "Hi team, love the pod each week. I wasn't able to go to the game in person, so it would be great to get your analysis on where and how our systems broke down to produce the 0 tackles inside 50. This may be for you, Big Man, the stoppage differential 18 to 32. If you've got any insights to that in terms of how many they brought to the stoppages and stuff. Do you have anything on that?
Working about that they always bring extras to the stoppage. And, what was interesting, I don't know what the intercept numbers are, but my feeling is that our intercept numbers were low. Definitely our turnover scores were low. We seem to be putting our eggs in the centre square basket for the clearances, but the stoppages they often bring a second up to the stoppage, and so they're a fantastic stoppage team. Let's face it, so Carlton and the Dogs are probably the two best stoppage teams in the AFL. I think it was the same, really similar to last week, wasn't it? In the sense that when Gawn is struggling, Jackson's struggling, you're going to lose a lot of those around the ground. And then, probably the other factor that's probably worth noting around stoppages is the absence of a second tall. And who takes I thought Wiedemann did all right in the rucking up forward, but you take a tall out of there, it's going to be a bit hard to do. So the stoppages. We're a low stoppage team. One of the things that was brought up last week, and someone on Demonland posted the post clearance contested possession numbers. We won that by 15 last week, and I didn't hear anyone talk about that in the media. Hardwick, I haven't heard them talk about this year, but Hardwick and Goody said multiple times, particularly Hardwick last season, that the most important stat in football is post-clearance contested possession, and we smashed Port last week in them. And that's the reason I bring that up in the context of stoppages, because you smash them when you put pressure, even when you lose the stoppage. The key is winning that next contested possession post-stoppage. And when Melbourne are up and about, we're the best in the AFL at it. And that's what Hardwick's point was last year. Unfortunately, I don't know what the numbers were. I went looking for them for this game, but you can't find that stat. And it just drives me nuts. You hear an AFL coach saying it's the most important number. I suspect it wasn't anywhere near as good as last week because, they were terrific post-clearance last night, and they generated a lot of their scoring from it. They generate a huge percentage of their scoring from stoppages, like Freo did in that game against Richmond. We'll talk about that a bit later, but it's an important part of the way they score, which I think is a structural weakness for them because, you can take it away from them better than you can take our strengths away, which is post-clearance, contested possession and intercepts down back. So that's, again, we get the benefit of dropping a player off who becomes that interceptor. It didn't seem to work as well as it normally would in this game. So I'd love to know if anyone has it. If anyone in the chat room, for instance, has that number, I'd love to know what that post-clearance possession was.
Murdoch 516, his discussion point he wants to talk about is our draw this year versus last year from this point of the season. And this is Murdoch saying, I'm not concerned about missing finals. More so, this year's draw doesn't lend itself to a scenario where some players can gain some needed confidence and fitness against the lesser sides like we did last season. Beating good sides can bring confidence. But last year, after we lost to the Dogs, we got a soft kill against the Suns and a road trip to the Eagles, which should have been a soft kill, but due to the conditions, it became a bit of a slog. This year, we are playing only top 8 or top 4 candidates, and with the tightness of the competition, all of them are going to be brutal games, which won't help the sore bodies that we have. So what do you guys think of that? We've got a tough draw coming home. Big man, you've talked about not wanting a soft kills going into a final series, but certainly when you got these big brutal games, it's going to take the toll on our players who are some of them are already banged up. So what are your thoughts on the competition going into the finals?
It looks definitely tough 4 games, but I mean, it was only really one of those games last year that was a walk in the park, and that was the Suns games. The other ones were brutal. I mean, all of our games have been brutal this year, so it doesn't matter who we play, whether premiers and the teams have gone after us. I think, we haven't nearly had any of the cards fall our way that we did last year. We had such a good run of luck last year, even in this game coming up in round 20 game last year. Remember, we were on the plane, it was cancelled in Thingo, and we played that game. It was going to be at their home ground, and we played it on the following day at Marvel in an empty stadium. And then, it wasn't as if we cruised in. We had a round 23 game for the ages. So it wasn't like it was, apart from that Suns game, it wasn't such a stroll in the park the end of last season. I mean, they've known it all season, that they've got 4 tough games. I think that the club would be thrilled to have them because, you want to be in your best form. I mentioned this before, but I've heard Jack Rewalt say that a big issue for them was 2018. He feels in hindsight was the last handful of games were too easy for them and they weren't ready for when they were finally pushed. They hadn't been pushed all season, basically. And the closer they got to the finals that year in 2018, the less they got pushed. And then when they finally did have a team, Collingwood, who came out and pushed them, they lost and lost pretty easily. So, I mean, it is what it is. I think that all of the teams are going to be potentially brutal, aren't they? Like, there's no game really. You'd have to probably be playing North Melbourne. Even West Coast are getting a bit more brutal at the moment. So there are no brutal AFL games, and injuries can happen in any game. I think, to be honest, my gut feeling is that the club would be really happy with this 4 games and it's time. I was really interested, if you go back and hear, if you listen to, I was going to get you to clip it up for us, Andy, but on the MFC website, there's an interview post-game with Max. And I don't know whether it's a bit of a slip of a tongue or it was a Freudian slip that he says at the end, but he talks about how excited he is about this week. And the slip of the tongue is that we're not going to lose again. But he was super excited the way he's talking about Friday. So I expect that the team is really looking forward to the challenge. And, for me, from a fan's point of view, what an awesome month of footy. Just to get to the finals in this next 4 weeks. I just can't wait to this Friday night's game.
It's like 4 extra weeks of finals, George.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit hard to compare the draw. I mean, the draw is put out there at the start of the season. You don't know whether it's going to be easy or hard for you. But the reality, the big difference between this year and last year is the injuries that we've suffered. It's too easy to forget, people like Langdon, May, Lever, Hibbert, Salem, and Gawn, Jackson, T-Mac, the list just goes on.
COVID, I mean, all clubs have had COVID.
But those players weren't missing last year.
No.
It was it's been a complete turnaround, and we've with the injuries, they've been to critical players. They're not the ones at the fringes. We've got plenty of those, it seems. But
key position players, George.
Exactly. Yeah, the Mays, the Levers, the Gawns, Oliver in the middle. These are the players who are right at the forefront of why we're where we are today. So that's a big difference from last year. Last year was an absolute dream run.
Couldn't have had a better run.
Yeah. So we took full advantage of that. We're still hanging in there. At the end of the day, we're still sitting on second place on the ladder. With 4 rounds to go. We'll keep our fingers crossed. We'll get rid of the curse that Bin Man's put upon the club, and the results will start coming our way. But these players are now starting to come back. We're seeing people like Joel Smith apparently will be available this week, I think. T-Mac we see running at the moment, so he might be coming back fairly soon. Players, Langdon seems to be getting his form back. Salem seems to be vastly improved from where he was a couple of weeks ago. So Yeah, we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks, but it's all in our hands.
And it's a good point about also the form is like that was you're right. It was a really disappointing.
Have a great night.
We should have won that game. Really, it was a poor last 10 minutes. No matter what the reason was, we looked fresh enough in terms of, in terms of that fatigue stuff.
Maxie, disappointing. The overarching theme of that one.
And is you spamming there?
No. I was going to pull up some audio.
Very good
of Max, but
just on form, they played fantastic footy, Bulldogs. They look great, and I thought it was a fantastic game to watch if you were a neutral. The Port game looks pretty good too in terms of they are a pretty good football team, as we were talking about last week, and really should have beaten the Cats. They would have beaten the Cats if they'd not allowed them to get out early doors, and should have beaten them in the end. And Cats is everyone's favourite team at the moment. They just get over the top of Port. Yes, it was home at Port, but Port's record at home actually isn't that fabulous. So, our form stacks up. The question is if all things being equal, is our best better than the next best? And the variable is we don't know injuries. Injuries always is the biggest factor in football. For me, it's like if we lose 3 key players on the eve of the finals, we're not going to be winning the flag most likely. But if we've got our best team, is the question I think people should be asking themselves is whose best is best. And I reckon if you asked the other contenders, the coaches would say the Ds. And I see Terrence has put in there. Toby Green was asked who are the premiership winners this year, and Terrence has put in the chat room that Toby Green said unequivocally, although he didn't actually say that, but that in Geelong and Melbourne.
All right. Travi14 has asked, could you discuss how that was an amazing game from the Dogs? Yes, in terms of our season, it's a bad loss, but no way can the Dogs play that week in, week out. I think you've talked about this. 8 out of 10 times they lose that game by 25 plus points. This is the 25 plus points. This is the blueprint to beating our defence. Freo did it, and the Hawks did it against us too. It shows how hard and how good you have to be to beat the Ds. We also played a very good game, and a couple of kicks or holding the balls fall our way, and we are clear top with Geelong. Our forward line is a worry, but it was last year. T-Mac is back running today, so I assume putting his hand up for selection at captain's run. I think he's still a few weeks off, Travi14. And yes, this loss puts us in a bad spot, but if we win one more by the end of the year, we probably finish top 4, and if we win 2, we will finish top 4. I'm forever optimistic, but we also have to come to the realisation that winning back-to-back is very hard, but we have the guys that can do it. I think we've talked about the Dogs enough, so we've talked about that for Travi 14, and glad that he's in your court, big man. He's got the confidence. Jabroni says, look forward to listening to the podcast. Outside of the Brisbane game, can the panel discuss a time this season where we have looked like the 2021 version? Have other teams figured out how to beat Melbourne, and we have just failed to counteract this? And for me, I don't think at any time this year we've looked like we did last year. We've never sort of got back to the heights. There's been reasons for it. We have had in-game injuries, particularly against some of the top teams, that 3-week period of the Fremantle, Sydney and Collingwood losses. But it's also a worry for me that we've never reached that heights. Also a worry for me is who we've lost to. We've lost to all the top 8 teams.
Can I ask though, Andy, if you think back from this point backwards in the season last year, think of last season. Which games could you think back that we were super impressive?
Richmond,
that were really
Geelong,
awesome.
The Geelong game early on, the Richmond game early on. I think that was a bit of a turning point when they came out and they were
we weren't fantastic above. In that Richmond game. We got a good win,
Sydney
but
game
we weren't.
Was a good win.
Good wins. We had good wins, but we
never thrashed any teams. It wasn't until later in the year. But
we were never the premiership. We never looked like the team we were come finals. So
I'm
I think
saying,
people
but we
are
haven't reached that point at any time this season.
But we didn't last season either.
Yeah, but
so
last
people
year
are thinking, we've never reached last year's heights. We haven't. But they're thinking of the finals. They're thinking of the last 4 games, and they're thinking of the finals. So the only game last season that was really as impressive as one of our finals wins, in my view, before we got rolling, before we thrashed the Suns, was the Dogs win in round 11. That was the only time where suddenly I thought, right, okay, this is super impressive. This team could go all the way. Even the Richmond game, that was more thrilling that we beat Richmond on Anzac Eve. But we weren't that impressive until late in that game. They came out and torched us early on in that game. We never really got rolling and put anything together until the eve of the finals, round 23. Really, that was the first time we clicked into gear. So I think you can't. I mean, you can, but it's a bit of a fool's errand to be thinking, well, we're not yet at the level we were in the finals, because we're not yet at the finals.
Yeah, but you're saying that like that's. I've watched teams like Hawthorn when they went through they were unbeatable any round of the year.
Our percentage is the same as it was last year. So obviously we're beating teams to the same extent that we were last year. We've played everyone once already. So now we've played enough games, haven't we? Our numbers are almost identical to last year. So on that metric, your eyes might tell you that we're not playing as well. But
yeah, because we've beaten up on bottom 8 teams.
But we didn't play that impressive. You read Demonland, we didn't play impressively
all of our wins
at all last
are against shit teams. We haven't beaten the good teams.
You can only play who's in front of you, though.
Yeah, we lost to some of the games that were in front of us.
Okay, so if we start beating the good teams,
suddenly if we start beating the good teams, then I'm on board.
And everyone will say, like, your good self will go, see, look, some magic dust has been spread in the air, and look.
Some curse has been lifted.
Yes.
It's all the curse.
We didn't play well last year. If you go back and just pick a random round from last year and go back to the Demonland Vault and look at how much criticism that team got last year. We got criticism on Demonland all year right up into round 23. I remember reading about the Suns game in that game, and people were bagging that still. We won by 110 points, and everyone was saying, well, of course we did. They're a terrible team.
It was only 97 and we should have won by 100 points.
Right, there you go.
Is this your first day on Demonland? It's like you just signed up today.
But it's a genuine question. Which game up until this round, to round 20 last season, was as impressive as any game after this point in time?
No, well, how can you compare anything to the Premiership?
Well, then why?
I can't. It's an argument I can't win, and now I have to hope that we lose the next.
That's my favourite argument.
Now I have to hope that we lose the next 4 weeks, so that I can say, I told you." Stu says, look forward to a great pod, guys. An observation of mine over the past 3 weeks has been small changes in our game day tactics to combat known issues. 1, efficiency when kicking inside forward 50, and 2, scores generated from turnovers/rebounds. Teams have kicked a lot of scores from turnovers between rounds 11 and 16, while also limiting how much we scored from turnovers. I imagine our inefficiency going forward was probably the cause of teams being able to score more from turnovers. Many kicks to spare defenders who could then launch the rebound quickly. At the same time, though, we were still beating teams or breaking even in clearances and contested possession. Since round 17 against the Cats, it seems we have tried a more rebound/counter-attacking style where we sit back from the contest very slightly to win the post-clearance possession or intercept and launch attacks from defence. Against the Cats, we had a few opportunities to get through their press, only for a fumble, a bad bounce, or the ball sticking in the heavy track, derailing it. This was more evident and successful against Port, which probably suited the much wider ground in Alice. Against the Dogs, we probably reverted to our close contested style in the first half and went back to the rebound style in the second half, which proved costly. But in both the Port and the Dogs games, our forward 50 kicking improved a lot, and from one game to the next. We managed to kick 100 points from 50 forward entries, which would be our highest ratio for the year, I imagine. We even kicked into the centre part of our forward 50 a lot more than we have all year, which when it didn't work also resulted in a few successful rebounds from the Dogs straight through the guts. In those 3 games, we've been beaten at clearances and in contested possessions. I think that's by design. Goodwin is trying to tidy up weaknesses of our games and thinking it's easier to do if we relax in other areas, clearance work and defensive forward movement. I imagine the plan is to combine that refresher on rebound strategy and kicking into forward 50 with our plan A, a strong clearance and contested work, defence first forward movement. This will give us 2 modes we saw in the finals last year. Have any of you noticed similar changes in tactics the last few weeks? And if so, do you think it's part of a tune-up before the finals or simply us not being able to, being up to the style that is popular this year? And I think, B-Man, you've sort of touched upon those things, that it is a bit of a change-up.
Well, definitely. And I think that's a really excellent question and post, because I hadn't noticed that sitting back in the rebound, but I mean that would partly explain some of our numbers. But I absolutely agree. I think he is experimenting, and that's what I mean. It's like Goody can't win. People bag him for being experimental and bag him for not changing, and most people don't even notice the tweaks that he's put in place in the last few weeks. So that's definitely one. We're looking more rebounding, that was similar to the question about kicking to the short pocket and going to the other side. That opens up the switch. I would totally agree that he's looking to clean up some things. The other thing is our highest. We get most of our scores from turnover, front half turnovers. In the last 4 or 5 weeks, we've dropped off a cliff, whereas other teams have been getting, like the Dogs, they're not a turnover team, and they were scoring from turnovers in this game. And all the other change to the whole AFL was how many more teams and Dogs were more territory than they've ever been. How many teams are territory focused now? So we're coming up against teams who they're tactically changed to be able to play to beat us, and Goody's responding, and in subtle ways. So I think I totally agree with Stu. I think that's a really a terrific observation, and I'd agree with it. Now's the time to experiment with things, and it is definitely a risk. If we finish top 4, people will come back at Goody and with some justification to criticise him for taking risks at this point of year.
George, anything you want to add to that?
No, it's just a very good observation from Stu, and it will be interesting in these coming weeks, because I think the errors that are occurring in a few individual players more so than the regulars. So we'll see how the team plays, and whether those players get the ball in their hands as much as they have been in the last couple of weeks.
And just it raises another sort of issue potentially, George, is that if they are implementing some new systems, and definitely there's no question that long handball, like it was so evident in this game. If you go back and look at the replay, how many times they handballed, and again, how many times there wasn't someone upfield, but it looked like, and Dogs were doing it as well. It looks like a number of teams are doing it, looking to get distance forward with the handball. But implementing anything like Stu was just as suggesting, or any different setup, like we won't go down to the line as often, means that just by definition, they're going to turn it over more or make more mistakes, because it's not second nature to them. They play in a particular model for 5-6 years, and suddenly they're trying to learn something on the fly during the middle of a season. A tweak here or a different change there, that's going to lead to mistakes.
The last one, and I don't know if we'll even touch on it, D. Altfart has said, if you can fit it in, I'd love to hear the views of the panel on whether the Jackson/Brayshaw contract issues are or are not impacting on team performance. Without going into whether you think they will sign or should sign or won't sign, do you think them not signing has any impact on their own performances, on just any in general things, George?
From Demonland's always got the answers to these sort of problems, and you've only got to look at the length of the Luke Jackson contract thread. By now, it's getting very close to the Tom Scully thread. But I think there was an interesting comment today that some people are suggesting that you have to listen to, and here we're giving a call out to another podcast, the Gorney and Gus show this week should have an announcement on it, so we'll wait and see.
What
comes out of that?
What did someone say? That
they're suggesting that Gus will make an announcement on the Gus and Gorney show this week. So
their numbers must be dropping there.
Do they have? Are they suggesting they have inside info, or they're just?
They do. Well, they always do on Demon Land.
Yes.
We're never wrong. So there's a few people suggesting the same thing. So we'll wait and see on that then. But look, in all honesty, I don't think that sort of thing worries players.
I don't think
when
so.
they
There's
walk onto the
bubble,
field for people who play any sport, people play sport to get away from the rest of the world, so to speak. In a lot of cases, when they cross that line, all they're interested in is chasing the Sharon around the field, doing their best and doing what they do. I don't think they care about those other matters. That's left in the hands of managers and who supposedly look after their best interest, perhaps not, but I'm sure they don't think about it in the slightest way when they cross that line.
Well, no doubt we'll be talking a lot more about that in the off season, and whether if Luke does end up leaving, whether we're being fairly compensated.
Let's not discuss that.
No use. We don't know anything.
Or that poor dog will be walking for another 3 hours.
Yeah, I think so.
DZF in the chat room, thank you. It's Dale. I don't know why there's got so many Dales in that team. Bailey Dale. I was sure that Melksham would go to him, and without Daniel in the side, Bailey Dale is their key mover from the halfback flank. And so I was amazed that they didn't put any work into him whatsoever, because I thought he was their most influential player. Arguably, certainly from the half-back flank, he 551 metres gained to have the most by 60. Let's see, what's that? 21, 78 metres. Most metre gains. Treloar was next. He had 27 possessions. Was a huge factor in the game. And I was surprised that Melksham didn't go to him early. Was on the outside, who was way underside for Keith, but it was clearly trying to stop his intercepts. But also when he was being so influential, again, Goody didn't. It's exactly the same as last year in that game. They just let Daniel run wild in that game, didn't put anyone on him. And the same with Bailey Dale in this game. No one went near him.
All right, let's move on. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. That was really good. Next week, bring them on again, and we'll do that rather than ask you about our positives and negatives. Let's hear from you. Let's talk about the Casey game. Casey Demons extended their unbeaten run to 15 wins to remain on top of the ladder, 3 games and percentage clear with 2 rounds to go, meaning they've secured the minor premiership. They defeated the Dogs by 23 points in a wet slog. Kate Chandler kicked 4 goals from 15 possessions, whilst Oscar Baker was best on ground with 33 disposals. Jake Bowie had 20 disposals, and rookie Blake Howes returned from injury with 20 disposals. B-Man, you were at the match at Winton Oval. Who impressed you?
It was fantastic. It was retro round, and I joked.
Can't get more retro than that.
Demonland. I got the train to Winton Oval. It was raining. The last time I saw Melbourne footy seniors play at that ground was 1987, round 22. I'm guessing we didn't have a bye back then, did we?
No.
And so it was such incredible memories. I stood in the same spot where I did this time there was no other fans, really. I was at the city end behind the goals. So it was terrific to be back. Brought back some fantastic memories of Do It for Robbie, that game, and of course listening to Dunstall kick a goal after the siren, or just before the siren, down at Cardinia Park to roll the Cats down there. So yeah, terrific memories. It was a great day. I really enjoyed it. Being at that ground and watching footy, it was a very tricky condition. So I'm not sure if you could tell on the telly, but it was basically raining that whole game, but like a fine mist. So it was super slippery. Kate Chandler was the standout Melbourne player. He was fantastic. He was terrific. For them, Martin was rucking and did a fantastic job and just really killed us in the air. We really struggled. Bell is pretty undersized, and I thought he played reasonably, but he was no match for Martin, who is shorter but much stronger, and he played fantastic. They had, I thought, geez, I've got my recruiting chops on here. This young fella looks all right, because we were talking with my mate, shout out to Gorilla, about if Jackson goes, how few decent ruckmen there are around the league that you could go get. Who would we replace him with? And I said, what about that young fella? He looks like the go. And number 10 for them. But as my mate said, well, good eye. He was picked number 2 in the draft. So, young Darcy's son. Yeah. So he looked good. For us, Kate Chandler, I said, was a clear standout. Sauce Baker played fantastic. If he was an elite level kick like Bailey Dale, he'd probably be an AFL player. It's just really the knock on him. He was in the right spots, playing the Langdon role. He's obviously super fit. He did lots of running up and down the ground. And he didn't get, I'm not sure of his numbers, but Van Ruin was just such a beast of a competitor all day. And just one thing that sort of stood out to me is for me to think this guy's got what you want in a footballer. So directly below me, he had run down the wing side, the Charlie Sutton stand side, tracked the ball down and had passed the ball, had run on by for the 1-2 and wasn't given the handball, and kept on running. So at this stage he's on the wing. He ran all the way to the forward pocket, and so I'm looking down the ground and he's just down in front of me on the left. He was completely spent, and the ball ultimately got kicked long into a contest into the forward pocket, and he was back from that aerial contest by about 4 or 5 metres, but he was knackered and he wasn't going to be able to mark the ball. He wasn't being able to get to the contest to mark the ball, but he just willed himself to get to the contest, just to even get there and make some sort of impact. And an impact he did make. He jumped up high enough, double fisted it down directly to in sort of diagonally front of the pack, and to Kay Chandler, who snapped one of his 4 goals. It was you wouldn't have probably seen that on the television. Well, not the last bit, because he was completely out on his feet, and afterwards, after he punched the ball, he was sucking wind. But just his desire to impact that contest, and he knew he couldn't mark it. There's no chance of him being able to mark it. Just to be able to get to that contest was awesome. And then a bit later, he completely, I'm not sure who he was on. It wasn't an AFL listed player. In a point of time when I thought, we were a chance of losing that match, he just completely hip and shouldered a fella in a one-on-one, put the fella on the ground and marked it. Slippery conditions, it should kick the goal 40, probably 30 metres out, slight angle, but went back and kicked it. Nice economical kicking action. And I said to my mate, he's the real deal. I know we've said it all season, but that was just thrilling to watch it so close. So no other Melbourne listed players really stood out. Hunt played serviceably, I thought. None really jumped out. It was really tricky conditions, as I said, because it barely stopped raining, and it was that sort of slippery, old school Melbourne winter rain. But it was another victory for them. So what's that now? 14 in a row?
15
in a row. So they're well drilled. Just on that switching things, looking down the ground at Whitten Oval, the Dogs still look to switch, even in their VFL teams. And at one point, they must have killed about 3-4 minutes in a low-scoring match down the other end of the ground, choosing not to get it out of their back half, which is your point, George, about you're better off getting it 70 metres away from your goal. And one of those times they turned it over, cost them a goal. The city end was the scoring end, and that was at the other end, so it was worth 2 almost, that turnover. But when you see it looking down the ground, it's sometimes a really long switch that just goes lateral. That same kick at the Whitten Oval gets you to the wing. I just thought an interesting sort of, you can see why territories now become the go-to way of playing footy.
The other thing that I particularly liked about JVR was even when he doesn't mark the ball, his second efforts are still fantastic, and not just second efforts. He's on the ground scrapping for the ball with all the others. Whereas you see normal forward rucks standing back, hoping that one of the mids gets the ball out. He's in the middle of it. And the other thing that I really love is when he is playing the full forward role, he presents beautifully. He presents beautifully up the ground as well. He's up on the wing, giving the outlet option. The T-Mac type role that we've been missing so much, and why he's not playing in the AFL side is simply beyond me, because he is already providing more than what the others who are currently playing in the role do. he will provide more than 0 tackles. He will provide more than 0 contested marks. He will be in there trying his guts out. So even if he doesn't do very much, he's going to be doing more in terms of those statistics than what's currently being provided.
Which is why I think there's a chance of coming in, but not till right near the end of this home and away, because he does still look undersized. Like you 100% agree with what you're saying, but live you can really see against the big boys. Against Stephen Martin at one point he was rucking. I know Stephen Martin's a big boy, but that's who he's going to be coming up against. But you're totally right, George, and it was really evident. I mean, that's the 3rd time now I've seen him live. But he really wants to be involved and gets frustrated when he makes a mistake. He thumped the ground really hard at one point, and it wasn't really anything. I couldn't work out at first what it was about. It was like a missed tackle or something. It wasn't like a major mistake. But he demands the ball. He wants the ball. He wants to be in every bit of play. And that's the sort of, in any sport, it's always the player, isn't it? It sort of takes a player a long way when they're so desperate to be involved in the action. And he's that sort of player. I reckon maybe sort of Dermot Brereton style, first qualifying final selection.
You reckon they'd pull the pin in a final?
Well, could he? I mean, he's not as predictable and boring as he allows himself to be painted, I think.
Well, according to you, he's playing 8-dimensional chess. So.
Well, I hope he is.
For both of you guys, where do you think Kay Chandler's going to go? I mean, I was surprised when I was listening to the broadcast. His average is 28 disposals for this season. What do you do with a guy who's got an average of 28 disposals in a game?
Can I tell you?
Still not getting a run.
Well, my problem with Chandler, with Bedford, is they do this in the twos. They come in and sometimes they're playing the sub, so it's not their fault, and then they come on and don't get much time to show anything. But they might, like Bedford, he had that fantastic game, but then hasn't been able to replicate that. So there's just not that consistency there. But then again, they're not getting that time to get that consistency. But I think they're very good twos players, but not necessarily up for AFL level. I
reckon Chandler, that was super impressive seeing him up. Like he was, I mean, it's a bit of a cliche. He's sort of above the level, but I don't think he's a player. My feeling is he's not a player who's above VFL and below AFL. He's not in that. I think it's a bit about what George's point really is. What's going to be his spot, because maybe a small pressure forward. Maybe if someone like a Nibbler, in George's sort of case, or even a Spargo drops off, then you've got a ready-made pressure or injured, for instance. You've got a ready-made pressure forward. But you're right, he's been playing a lot of mid, so 28 possessions is a pretty solid average.
He had 15. Well, you're saying he averaged that. He had 15 this week. But he's also played against the 13th team in the VFL.
Yeah, he still kicked 5 goals though.
Yeah, in wet slip, as I said, and they're all classy. Like one of them was, the goal that I mentioned before that crumbed off the pack, where it wasn't really crumbed. He smashed it straight down. He's bounced, hit the ground. But he moved to his left and got it sort of out into space. And I think only the real clever players have that ability to sort of get square to the goal, so to speak, and get that channel. He looked really good, I thought.
All right, let's go to ins and outs. Given the footy department's penchant for not upsetting the apple cart, changes for this week will most likely be predicated on the fitness of Ben Brown and Jake Lever. If they're fit to return, then it's predictably likely that Sam Wiedemann and Adam Tomlinson will make way for them. Can you see anything different happening this week, George?
I can't see a future for Melcham the way he's playing. There's Wiedemann may well not go out. If Brown comes back in, there's the opportunity to play the double forward, or a JVR comes in for Wiedemann. But I can't see the value that Melcham is providing. 0 tackles. He just waits out on the outside for the cheap stuff, and you need more forward pressure that we wanted this week. It just didn't come. So
very disappointing after 7 tackles last week.
Yeah, it completely dropped off. Yeah. So I could see that one happening. The other one that we've got to worry about is Jimmy Jordan. If the knee doesn't come up. He was really heavily strapped in the game, although he played it out. So once again, we'll have to wait and see on that one.
On the replay, it looked all the world like an ACL. Like it was a hyperflex, and it looked bad. And then later on in that same game, well, it's obviously the same game, but he got clogged in the head pretty hard a bit later. So I think the outs will be Melksham will come out, Tomlinson will come out, and Brown will come back in, hopefully. I think you're right. Weed will stay in the team and Lever back in. And suddenly we're looking like our premiership setup. And bar one or two players, we're pretty close to our premiership team as well.
Let's get into...
Bar one player would just be Wiedemann, wouldn't it?
Yeah, T-Mac.
No, Bowie.
Bowie.
So he played all right. I read on Demonland, a few people said he played terrific. I wasn't as impressed, actually. And I said to my mate at the footy, I wonder if some players, and he might be one of them, the higher the level, like the speed and space in AFL suits him, whereas at this is the only time I've seen him at live at VFL level, but it was slippery conditions, but he didn't seem to stand out in the way that, say, Chandler did, for instance.
He's had 20 disposals, 19 kicks, 1 handball, 6 marks, 3 tackles.
Yeah. Maybe I just didn't notice him as much.
Let's turn to our opposition. The Demons and I will be heading out west this week. This will be
you're going, Andy.
Yeah, this will be my... I have to see it in the flesh. This is my first pilgrimage to the holiest of holy sites, the location of our drought-breaking premiership. I want to maybe... And
God, now I'm not so confident we'll win.
Why? Because I'm there.
Well, your record over there is terrible.
No, well, I'm 1 for 1. One win, 1 loss. So I was there for the spectacular game that got us into the finals, but then I backed it up a few weeks later and didn't turn out so well. So I'm going for redemption. We actually have a caller on the line, guys. So before we go into our opposition watch, good evening. Welcome to the Demonland podcast. Who am I talking to? Oh, hold on a sec, mate. It's come off the Bluetooth to my thing. So if you just hold on a sec, I'll try and get you back on. Hello, you there?
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, okay, you're on now.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
This is a bit of a privilege. I just want to give you guys a wrap. I love what you guys do. I came through to the podcast that last year. I just love what you guys do. I'm in awe of how you dissect the game, how you look at it, how you have different personalities. I love your podcast. I was actually featured on your podcast. I'm the bloke with the tattoos on the chest. A bit late last year from Canberra, and I'm a bit awestruck by you guys. So thanks for taking the call.
No,
I like how I'm a little bit like all of you guys. I'm a bit like you, Andy. I have MFCSS, and I'm a bit like Ben Mann because I'm eternally optimistic as well. And my old man is very much like you, Andy. He can't watch the games at the moment. So, look, I'm sorry to have talked for so long.
No, by all means.
Ben Mann, to you, where's your optimism for us? I'm sure you've talked about it for the last hour. I know I've just been catching up on 360 and all that, and I'm sure you will later. But how's your optimism, mate? Where do you see us in these last 4 rounds? And I love your theories on loading. I believe in it, and I like where you go with it each week. George as well. Where's your optimism? Where do you feel we're at?
I'll say and hand over to George, but when you do if you listen to the podcast on Catch Up, you'll hear a fair dose of my optimism. But one thing I would say is one man's optimist is another man's realist, and I think I'm a realist, not an optimist, which is sort of my point that I was making before, Andy, is that, somehow if you think positive things are going to happen, and somehow that you're a crazy whacker. So I actually think I'm a realist, not an optimist, but I'll hand over to George.
It's a big call. The optimism I get is that we're sitting second on the ladder still with 4 rounds to go. It's we've got the opportunity in our hands now. We've got the players coming back that we need. So I don't think we'll actually have too many problems with Fremantle this week. They're playing good football, but from what I saw, and we'll talk about this very, very shortly, given what I saw playing against Richmond last week, I don't think we'll have any real problems starting off our run into the finals.
And do you think Geelong is the team to beat?
I absolutely think they're the team to beat. I don't think any teams are going to get close to them. But that's me and my negativity. But yeah, I can't see anyone getting close to them at the moment. I think their forward line's too potent, and they've changed up enough things. We'll see if their game stacks up in finals. Looks like it's different. B-Man, what do you think? You're on mute.
I mean, I rate Geelong much more highly this year than I did last year, and I think we've talked about it a few times. I just think that their tactical change to be a more territory team it was a no-brainer to do. I'm really impressed that Scott did it. It suits their players. I heard them talk about at the beginning of the season sitting down and saying, well, let's play to our strengths a bit more. Definitely one of their strengths is their contest ball. They've got a lot of 30-plus players who are hard at the contest. If Dangerfield is fit, he's a weapon. So that territory, get it forward, is definitely a benefit. But I think that their challenge will come on the space of the MCG come finals, because what they lack is genuine leg speed. And we'll talk a bit about Freo in a sec, and that's definitely something they don't lack, which is why I would probably put them Geelong second seed. But it's one of the other reasons I'm confident about this season is that I think our very best is better than Geelong's, and increasingly better than Freo. But Freo are probably a team that's got the most similar system to us with some tweaks, and their pace is a point of difference. Freo's genuine leg speed, they've got 4 or 5 players who are really quick. Geelong don't have that. So, but yeah, I would definitely have us 1 seed and them 2nd seed.
It's a good problem to have, isn't it, gentlemen? To be worrying about the fact that we're second on the ladder.
I'm more in the camp that I'm not sure we deserve to be in second of the ladder, and we're there.
To be.
And then we'll be found out.
This is why you guys are fantastic to listen to.
Can I just ask, caller, what you mentioned the tattoos before? What was that about? I'm trying to rack my brains to recall that. Can you just expand on that? Yeah, sure. It was around about July, August last year where one of the betting agencies got a photo from a friend. I'm the one who has all the demon emblems on my chest. Oh yes.
The one that was featured on Demon Land was missing the important one. I hope to get another one at the end of this year.
Fantastic. I do remember that now.
Keep it up, gentlemen.
Thanks. What was your name? Gentlemen. Catch your name.
Caller, what was your name?
My name's Kieran.
All right.
Kieran from Canberra.
Thanks,
good on you, Kieran from Canberra.
Mate, we love what you do.
Thanks, mate. We really appreciate.
Keep it up, lad.
Thank you, mate. We appreciate the feedback. Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, Kieran. Terrific. Freo, just speaking of Freo, I think I watched that game with real interest on it's Friday night, wasn't it? The draw. It was Freo dominated that last quarter. They will be absolutely gutted they lost. I'm furious that the bloody Tigers didn't, because the last 5 minutes of that game was fascinating, because if they had dominated that last quarter, Freo, except for the last 5 minutes. And watching the game sort of with a view to talking about it tonight, but also thinking of them, the fact that we're going to be playing them this week. They've got a lot of similarities to us, but more and more I watch them, the more and more I think they've got some key differences as well. And one of them is that leg speed that I mentioned. If it does come to pass that Jackson goes to Freo, the player I'd want if there was a swap would be Darcy, probably, because he's going to be a genuine star, but he's young on the halfback flank. He's a beautiful, beautiful kick. He's really critical to the way they play. He's their Bailey Dale. He runs hard. He attacks the ball. I thought, though, it was a real tell the way Richmond played in that game. Richmond should have put them away early. They dominated the last quarter, Freo, but Richmond should never have been in a position to lose that game. They were smashed them, and they smashed them because they were so physical and their tackle numbers were off the charts, and Freo just couldn't handle it. So for me, that was a real surprise. I was surprised at how, not that pressure would undo them a bit, but how much... how effective it was, Richmond's blunt pressure, which is the sort of pressure of all the teams in the AFL. Richmond's game plan and way of playing is most similar to ours. I mean, we've it's the other way around, really. We've copied theirs. We've got a much more dynamic defensive system, and I think that's the big difference between the two teams. And we've got the two rucks, and so some other tweaks. But the focus on forward half, turn it over in your forward half, high pressure, smashing him at the contests is really the same. So it was a fantastic game to watch from that lens, thinking about how we would play them. And one of the interesting things, one of the earlier questions was about this idea of how extras to the stoppage and the fact that we don't bring an extra to the stoppage. Freo would bring 2 extras to the stoppage. And one of the things that they were criticised on the some of the commentary at halftime, and I think it was a reasonable point, was not chaining out well enough away from the contest. If you bring extras to the stoppage and you want to transition the ball, and this is what the Dogs do, and it's why they've got a problem. The Dogs structurally have got a problem, and I think Freo have got the same problem, is that the way to move it away from that contest is to chain up those handballs. The problem with that is that method is susceptible to really high pressure, and Richmond completely exposed it. They broke down that chain, could only get 2 or 3. They were criticising for not chaining it out. That's because they couldn't. Later in the game, they tried to kick it out, and when they kicked it out, the problem with kicking it away from the contest when you're a stoppage is that if you bring 2 extras to the stoppage, Richmond had 1 and 2 extras in their defence, and they kept on mopping it up. And that's what Melbourne will do. And they were criticising the Dockers for not using the players around the contest and chaining it out. That's because the reason they weren't doing it is they tried that in the first half and those chains kept on breaking. And it's the same with the Dogs. When we're up and about and applying our highest level of pressure, they can't chain out. The other thing that's really interesting about how Freo play is compared to Melbourne is they really use the width of the ground and really tried to stretch oppositions. One, that's just the way they like to transition it. But I was really thinking watching that game on Friday night that I think it's they're really, they haven't got enough guns, physical big beasts in their midfield to compete with us, for instance, if it becomes a war of attrition in the midfield. What their point of difference and the thing that they've got over us is their genuine leg speed. And the only way to maximise that leg speed is to get the ball out into space. And so I think very much that game plan is a function of designing a system around their current players. And perhaps they'll shift a little bit once they get some big balls. But basically, Brayshaw is their most competitive midfielder now. And I know there was talk on this very issue about bringing Fife up into the midfield to give them some ability to beat the Bontempellis or the Olivers or the Tracks, or at least to compete. At the moment, their midfield is undersized, so they do need to get it out. And I think that's a weakness. It's a huge out for them, Fife. That's really going to make it hard for them because that big body to be able to throw into the midfield to neutralise a Petrarca, for instance, is big for them. So, I think look for them to really try and stretch the Optus Oval, and it'll be a real test for us and a real test for what I'm talking about in terms of our freshness, because if we can't shut that down, there's been a lot of talk about have other teams worked us out, and the way to beat Melbourne is go fast through the corridor or stretch us. That only works when we can't get our defensive system, our offensive net across to cover it. If we're fit and fresh, Freo will not be able to get it forward, and that's they can stretch us all they like, but if we can move that system across, which we've not been able to do in the last 6 or 7 weeks, then they're going to struggle. Their forward line really looked impotent for the first time last week against Richmond, and that was largely on the back of the way Richmond's just made their transition a nightmare, and so they couldn't get any free movement into the other benefit of stretching out the opposition is you then get more unpressured kicks inside 50. And so you're getting players like Walters or Fredericks, from 70 metres out in open space under no pressure kicking inside forward. Well, you're going to hit up your leading forwards. You're going to hit your lobs. But the Tigers didn't allow them any of those easy kicks, so they had to kick high into their forward half, and then Grimes just went to work down there. Vlosten went to work. They suddenly looked like an average forward line, and they had Taberner played. Yeah, he did play. So they had their two guns in there, Taberner and Lobb. Lobb looked hopeless.
Lobb didn't play.
Lobb didn't
That's
play,
why
so there you go.
That's
He
why
couldn't look
terrible.
hopeless. Yeah, so that's right. There you go. So they didn't. So they were down Lobb. That's right.
He
they were
will
down
be
Lobb.
back. Yeah, he will be.
Yeah,
back.
so they were down Lobb, which made it hard for them. But they and he's. I mean, I guess it's as important for them, him being out, as T-Mac out for us, I guess. So, but yeah, I thought looking at that game is that if we bring our highest level of pressure and can sustain that pressure for the full game, they'll really struggle to go with us.
The Dockers also have only won 2 of their last 5 games, or 2.5, I guess.
It was interesting. I only saw sort of the last half of that game, and you're right, big man. When Richmond brought the pressure on their midfield against the Freo midfield, they fell apart. Cochin in the last quarter took them apart just from a physical aspect. Freo
in that last 5 minutes, he did.
Yeah. When the game was on the line to be won, they couldn't stand the physical pressure. It was interesting. There was another question, Andy, from one of the people at the break of Gorn asked about the last time we played the Dockers. They had lots of centre square goals earlier in the season. It's easy to forget this far down now that in that game we'd lost T-Mac. Langdon was out. Stephen May was out with concussion. Petrarca was obviously carrying some sort of injury, which meant all our clearances were well and truly down, which played absolutely into Freo's one wood. So once again, if you take away their ability to move the ball out of the centre, once again we really would have won that game. We had in that game we had Luke Dunstan playing in the midfield and managed to get only 12 possessions. So we were down right in the engine room in that game. I don't think the Dockers are going to be as much threat to us as what we might have suspected once we start to get all our prime movers back in the right places.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, they, by the same logic that I've been talking about, they could have easily been sort of not fresh and loading for this game as well, except they ran out the game better than the Tigers. So to my eye, they didn't look like a fitness or fatigue issue for them. The other thing is a bit like that, like I said earlier in the show, was their decision to switch from that kick out cost them a game, I reckon, cost them a win. But that's the problem with that whole switch methodology and keeping it in your forward line, exactly as you're pointing out before, George. If you turn it over 30 metres from your goal, you're going to cough up a score 80% of the time or something. You turn it over 60, 70 metres out, well, maybe it's 10%, 20%. And they take a lot of risks. Like they were going through the corridor against the Tigers a lot, and Tigers sweated on them. Their points from turnovers was up around where it should be for the Tigers. And our turnovers, as we've talked about, have been lower. But it's about that pressure. The other thing is that bringing 2 extra of the stoppages to win stoppages is great when it works. But if you don't, it means that wherever that extra players are, and we have them down back, you've got 2 free footballers running around. And, that means you need your Sparrows, you need your Vineys, you need your Olivers and Track to be at their powerful best, because it's 4 against 6 sometimes in those stoppages.
When I was watching that game, like I said, I only saw the last half. I was amazed at the number of turnovers from both sides. I really thought this is 8th playing 9th. They were unforced turnovers, and that kept Richmond in the game. And Richmond certainly had the opportunity to win that game quite easily.
Totally.
But so did Freo. But both sides just kept turning it over. Well, if they do that sort of against us this week, then it's going to be all one-way traffic.
I mean, fair play to Richmond. I mean, I don't know that they're as fit enough. Their numbers in the last quarter have been appalling, Richmond. I think I read or saw they've lost 7 or 8 games where they've been leading in the last quarter at some point. I mean, so And it fell away a little bit. But as you say, Cochin in the last 5 minutes almost dragged them single-handed back into it. But that pressure, it's all about the pressure, isn't it? And if, it'd be great if they put that pressure number up. But as soon as, when Richmond were cranking up the pressure, Freo couldn't manage to move the ball. So it was I was a bit surprised. I thought Freo were going to win that game, and was pleasantly surprised in the sense that I think we will bring that pressure next week.
The other good thing is this is the first time in about 5 weeks that the team that we're playing has had a decent game.
That's a good point.
That's a really good point. They haven't been playing North Melbourne by 2 or West Coast Eagles.
And a brutal game too.
It was a brutal game.
Yeah.
And we also didn't bring this point up, is that we were coming off the heat of the Alice Springs game.
Yeah. And they're coming off the cold of of the Docklets. and no Fife. Fife out is a big... I know he's only been in for a few weeks, but he was approaching somewhere, he was getting back into his better form, wasn't he? And it looked a pretty bad hammy to me.
Yep.
All right, boys. I think we're going to leave it there. Thank you. We've got a lot of people to thank tonight. Thank you to D Zephyr. Thank you to Big Mac Jr. Thank you to At the Break of Gorn, Murdoch 516, Travi 14, Jabroni, Stu, D Old Fart, and thank you to Kieran from Canberra for calling in, and John as well who left the message for us. Thank you to him too. Thank you, Big Man. Thank you, George, and we'll be back next week. Hopefully I come back from the pilgrimage with the riches, all the riches that a trip to the West shouldn't have. Let's go, Demons.
Go Red Leggers.